Hello, hello, Second Act Success listeners. You may be thinking, that's not Shannon, and you're right. Hi, I'm Kristen Latini, host of the Build Your Own Fairy Tale podcast, where we explore different ways to do life, whether that's organizing your closet or starting a business. Our current season shares stories of women who have paved their own career paths outside of the traditional 9 to 5, with the added bonus of a fictional or fairy tale character reference in each episode. Fun fact, this is how I met Shannon, because she is an example of just one of the inspirational stories you'll hear as we take steps towards building our fairy tales. And you'll have to listen to episode 48 if you want to know which character Shannon would be. You're already listening to the Second Act Success podcast, so super easy, you can search for the Build Your Own Fairy Tale podcast in that very same player when you are ready. Now that I've sufficiently hijacked this introduction, please help welcome the host you've been waiting for, Shannon Russell.
Are you at a crossroads in your career? Ready for a change, but you're not sure how to get there? Don't worry, we are about to produce your best life together. Welcome to the Second Act Success podcast. I am your host, Shannon Russell. I am a former television producer turned boy mom. I left my dream job to find family balance, and in doing so, I produced my dream life. Now I am a business owner, podcaster, and career coach. My mission is to help other women like you find what they are truly meant to be doing. If you are ready to start over in your career or pivot to a new purpose, then get ready to be inspired by stories of women who have done just that. We will share advice and actionable tips to motivate you as you move along on your path. It is time to shine, so let's start producing your balanced life of abundance today. This is Second Act Success. Boy, do I have a great story for you today. We are going to be chatting with Nicole Baldinu. She started off in education out of Australia. She decided that she wanted to not only teach children, but travel the world. And she did that. Next, she decided, maybe this isn't for me. Let me get into film. And she tried film school. And now she owns 2 businesses and hosts an incredible podcast. I can't wait to get into how she went from teaching in Australia to owning 2 very successful businesses here in the States. So let's get to it. This is Nicole Baldinu and her Second Act Success story. Hi, Nicole. Welcome to Second Act Success. How you doing?
Hey, Shannon. Really great to be here. Thank you. I'm doing well.
I'm so excited to get to know you and hear about your story. So you began your career in education, is that right?
Correct, yeah. The reason I actually chose as a career was because I didn't actually grow up with a lot of stability in terms of financial stability. So for me, as soon as I had the opportunity, there was no question that after high school, I'd go to university. But when it came to actually choosing what I would study, it would have to be something that would guarantee a career, a safe career, a very long-term career. And so I chose education.
That is a very stable career. You know you can teach until retirement, so that was very practical.
Mm-hmm.
Were you always interested in kids growing up? Were you babysitting?
It's funny because clearly, as this podcast, the premise of this show, there's a second act, right? So I'm currently not teaching. But the teaching of kids wasn't necessarily something that was the reason why I left. I actually enjoyed the students. They're a lot of fun. I taught teenagers for most of my career. So they're a lot of fun. They can be a wild bunch and you've got all spectrums of, behavioral issues. But in general, teaching kids was great. And even though I didn't have that as an experience, like you said, like babysitting, it wasn't anything that kind of pushed me to teach in that regard. But what actually I enjoyed was languages. And I always enjoyed being in the classroom. I enjoyed being a student. And so I could see myself in that teacher-student relationship of just being in that environment that I really thrived and I really enjoyed. So it made sense to me, well, I like languages. I like the classroom environment. I enjoy being a student. So why not, be a teacher?
And so you went to school in Sydney?
Yes. Yeah, I grew up. I was born and raised in Sydney. Yeah. Parents were Italian. They migrated to Australia in the late 70s and I was born, not too far after, but grew up in Sydney.
Wonderful. That's my destination that I just wish to go to one day. So fingers crossed.
We're waiting for you. Definitely.
Yay. So you go to university and you get your degree in education and you are a teacher to high school?
Yes, I studied languages and I thought, okay, that sounds like a great idea. I'm going to be a language teacher. I studied French, Spanish, Italian. Those are all my languages. But midway through my education, one of my professors said, you have a better chance of getting a job as an ESL teacher, as an English as a second language teacher. It was a conversation, a very brief conversation that made me decide, oh, I'll switch my major and, my languages will be my minor and English as a second language will be my major. And therefore I can teach overseas, which was kind of another thing that I thought, oh, it was attractive about teaching, the opportunity to teach overseas. Pretty much after I graduated and had a very short, I took a maternity leave position at one of the schools here, I got an offer to teach in Japan. And that pretty much, started the next years of my life where I started teaching overseas and not teaching in Australia.
How was that experience?
Japan was amazing. It was, it's a very unique place. It's a great country to live in. And it was my first time really living abroad. And I was only 24 at the time. So there were elements of culture shock that I experienced, but it was, it was a lot of fun. I was able to do the career that I had embarked on. I was earning more than I could have earned here in Australia as a starting out teacher. So that was also very attractive at the time as well. And I was living overseas and I could travel and, have all these stories and great experiences to tell. I thought, oh, this is great. I'm definitely on the right path,
When did things start to change?
I was in teaching for 12 years before I left. So this is my first 2 years in teaching that I was in Japan. I returned to Australia and worked for a little bit here. And then I got the bug again. I was like, where's the next place to go to? Because remember, I was sold this, dream from that professor that if I taught, English as a second language, I could teach all over the world. So when I came back, I was like, okay, it's great. I'm happy to be home, but I still had that desire to travel and to see the world. So I was like, where's next? Where's the next destination? And a lot of people at that time started talking about Dubai as one of the destinations. I ended up then making that the next stop. And that was 6 years of teaching there. So it was finally in Dubai that then things started to change. I'd already stacked up over 10 years in the classroom between Japan, Australia, and Dubai that I started to feel like this isn't actually where my heart's at. This isn't where I see myself for the rest of my life.
Where did you see yourself? What was your underlying passion of what you wanted to do?
I wasn't sure at the time. And one thing I didn't tell you at the beginning was that when I did go into teaching and I thought it was a sensible career and it was a wise choice, I did always think it would be a fallback. I thought this is something that I'm pretty sure I don't want to do for the rest of my life, but it's a smart decision and I can always fall back on it. But I never really looked for something else until that time when I was in Dubai and I started to really question. And at that time, I just felt like it's now or never. I felt stifled in teaching. Teaching isn't a creative career. It can be, but there are so many restrictions. If you think about your timetable, where you've got to be, all of that, it's very, very restrictive. And I just wanted something that gave me more flexibility. And I knew I wanted to do something creative. And so I started to think, well, what can I do? And I really didn't feel like I could do anything else. I didn't feel like I had any other skills. So I just decided to do a short filmmaking course, just one weekend. And I thought, well, if I can just do this 2-day weekend course and see if this is something that I want to, pursue further, I might think about, going to study film. And yeah, that's how it happened. I thought, this sounds really fun. This looks interesting. Let me resign and go to New York. That's what I did.
Wow. So you took this course. Where was the course? Was it Dubai?
I was in Dubai. I was still teaching. I hadn't given my notice or anything, and I knew I'd have to give 6 months notice. So I just literally did this weekend thing just to see if this was a possibility of something else that I could do. And so when I did think like, all right, I could probably go and study and do something else, which sounds really grandiose at the time. I think back to that person. I'm like, wow, go you, Nicole. Like I think I've become,
Really?
yeah, I've probably become a little bit more, cautious as I've gotten older.
But that's exciting. The fact that you just saw something about this course, you went and took it. Obviously, that was a pretty cool course if it made you think about upping your life and just completely changing your path.
Yes. And I think sometimes it just might be an excuse that you need. Like, I think it had always been building, right? This desire to do something different. It's that either listening to your gut, your intuition, that little voice that you kind of, tell to be quiet more
Mhm.
often than not. And so I think it was always building. So it was just a very easy way to say, well, this looks like fun. I could learn to do something different. And I knew with giving 6 months notice that it would give me a bit of time to, build a bit of a runway, a bit of savings, plan my next move. It was enough time. It's probably not a long time, but it was enough time to say, okay, I've handed in my resignation. Okay, let me decide then where I'm going to move to and what filmmaking course I'm going to do.
I think that's nice because so many times guests or my clients will be sitting here thinking they have to do that jump tomorrow. And so having that 6-month leadway must have just given you a little bit of a breath to not feel so rushed. You
Yes.
made this gigantic decision, but you had time to kind of map it out.
Right.
So within that time, were you dead set on going to New York City? How did you kind of plan that next move once the 6 months were up?
I didn't know where I was going. New York came up as an option when I was talking to my now husband, Omar, who at the time we were just friends, and
Aw.
he's from New York. I was open to going anywhere really. I knew I didn't want to come home though, which was funny. And so he suggested, why don't you check out New York Film Academy? That's a really highly reputable academy. I started to, imagine, research New York, look it up, and all of these things. And I thought, oh, yeah, actually, this could be a great option. I saw that they were offering a short course that coincidentally started pretty much a few weeks after the school year would end and I was leaving. I had some savings by then and it was pretty penny because it is New York. And one of the other things I think I thought of at the time, because I was already in my 30s and I'm making this decision. So if I'm now going to put this next thing on my CV, because I was still thinking of CVs and resumes, that's where
Yeah.
my head was at. I was like, well, it better be from the best place that's got a reputation that will give me kind of that leg up. That's how I came to land on New York Film Academy, and Oma joined me a few months later and we teamed up there as well. So there was a whole romance to that as well. Like,
How amazing. So New York was just another step on that travel the world kind of adventure you were on. So tell me about New York. How was this next jaunt into filmmaking for you?
well, I had the time of my life because I was doing something so different and so free and fun, compared to being in a classroom. I was in a classroom now, but there were people from all over the world. New York Film Academy attracts all these students who were a lot younger than I was because they're just, at the beginning of their journey. So, I made a lot of friends from everywhere and we would, team up for the little projects that we had to do to present to our teachers. And I learned a ton, I was just a sponge, for everything that was being handed to us because I thought, oh, I have to make this work. I did feel that sense of like, if this is what I'm going to do now, I have to give it my all. And as soon as we were graduating, I started to look for, well, what can I start working on? I really didn't want to be without work. I'd kind of had a whole life where I was just always making sure that I was never without work. And I think that, came from my upbringing. There was a bulletin board in one of the rooms that were in the building. There was this artist who was advertising for basically a videographer to film him while he was producing artworks around New York that he would exhibit at the end of the summer. I thought, I'm going to go for that. I'm going to apply for this because I need to start working right away. I ended up applying for this little job that it was for free, but I knew would be my kind of, entry into filmmaking, and got it.
How was it? I come from the TV world, so I'm very used to freelance, going from project to project. So now you're here working for free on this project. And are you thinking, this is amazing, but it's only another couple of weeks and I have to look for the next job?
Yeah, I had saved up, so I had a bit of a runway. I realized how inexperienced I was, and how fortunate I was to even just be doing something for free just to get the experience. So I think I was just 100% focused on this being really awesome, which is a little bit naive because your first work is never going to be great. But for me, I was like, I have to make this great. I have to. And of course, as I look back on it now, it's very cringeworthy, but you have to have that cringeworthy work, right?
Yes, we all have it.
So, it also gave me motivation to realize that like I had momentum. And I think that's really important as soon as you start to make these changes, that you have momentum. And I'm very thankful for the fact that I allowed myself to take these opportunities, which meant that then the next opportunity would come. As soon as that gig wrapped up, I put my CV up on, I think it was, there's some site in New York where you advertise, and I got a response right away. My first gig was like $500. It was peanuts. I did so much work for that first $500 gig, but it meant the world that I just had picked up the next thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, all of your hard work was kind of coming together, and your second career was just like taking off in a whole new way. So how long were you filmmaking in New York, and how far did you really take that aspect of your journey?
Not very far. It was a short-lived career in the sense that I realized, I think probably on my fourth project, that I didn't want to be making other people's movies, but I had learned so much and I had so much fun. And at the same time, while that was going on, while I was freelancing, Omar and I, my now husband, had teamed up, and he was building his business. It was a consultancy business. And he came to me at a certain point. So we're talking about, I'd say it was about 6-7 months later. And he said, I've got this idea for an online business community. I've got the content and the curriculum built out, but I would need someone to shoot the videos. How about we work together? He'd been helping me with my gigs, negotiating rates, all those things in business that I wasn't very comfortable with. And I just needed someone to bounce ideas off. He was helping me with that. I was kind of giving him some input into his consultancy business. So when he came to me and said, we can marry our skills together and do something together, how does that sound? And, after trying to get client after client, chasing up invoices, making sure I'm getting paid, I was like, okay, this sounds good. Let's do this. So that's when I pretty much abandoned the dream of being some sort of director or filmmaker, and putting my skills that I'd learned to our business, the $100 MBA.
Right. So you're working together and you're using all of those skills, and even the skills from teaching, even the skills from really setting up an idea and kind of working towards teaching your future customers or clients. Tell me how this business really took off and what it's all about.
The $100 MBA is an online business training community for people to start an online business, to leave their side hustle, to get the foundations of business without going to business school for $100. That was the entry point. We built the $100 MBA, and we were getting members into the community. And we started a podcast that didn't do so well, that flopped earlier on. And while we were, trying to get members into the $100 MBA, Omar started to run webinars. He was putting a webinar together every week. And this is back in 2014, when there weren't really that many options out there. And it was just a headache to put a webinar together every week. So he kind of slapped together a piece of software with a freelance developer to start running webinars for the $100 MBA. And when we were running those webinars to get these new members in, someone had asked him, what are you using to run this webinar? And he said, just something I slapped together. And then somebody said, can I buy it? At that moment, he realized, okay, there's an opportunity, because he's got this business brain. He'd been side hustling, building businesses for years. He saw an opportunity to build a webinar platform to have a webinar product, a software. And he came to me with that idea and he says, I think we can do this. Because we were building the $100 MBA and it was growing, but it was growing very slowly. The number of members coming in aren't as many as, when we had a massive launch at the start. So he came up with the idea for Webinar Ninja, which is our other company. So we've got 2 companies, and that's where Webinar Ninja came about to be. So while we're, building these 2 things, we've got the $100 MBA, we've got Webinar Ninja, we still believed in podcasting. Podcasting was something we had attempted to try and do, but kind of had failed at it. And we thought, no, but we want to give it another go. And so we then launched the $100 MBA show podcast, which, has done very, very well. I'm very grateful to say. Those things just really keep us busy full time.
Oh, that's fantastic. And who knew, right? You're in New York at this time, right?
We had moved to San Diego.
So now you're in San Diego, which is perfect because there's so many different startups in the business world there too. And you're just working as a team. Were you married at this point?
No, not yet. We were engaged. Okay. We had a very long engagement, but not married.
So how was that even working with your fiance to create these 2 businesses? Because creating a business is not an easy feat.
It's not. And, being in business now, we're in our 10th year. You have to be grateful for every day that you are in business. It's not something we take very lightly. I think Omar and I got very lucky in a sense that we were able to have complementary skills. We were just colleagues before we were even a couple. It's possible we had that foundation. We get that question all the time, like, oh my God, how can you work with your spouse? Don't you want to kill each other? I get that. I do get that. I can see why people would say that. We've made it work, but we're very intentional about our roles and how we support each other in our respective roles as well. I'm really lucky, but I think that sounds really trite. It does take work.
It takes work, but you're balancing 2 businesses and a podcast. So there's plenty of work to be done. So you can stay in your lane, work on what you're doing, and meet up in the middle. It's a good teamwork. How are you able to make both businesses and the podcast so successful?
The podcast, a huge credit to Omar, who's been, publishing and recording over 2,000 episodes. We're talking 8 years, so it's consistency. The consistency has paid off. The commitment to a consistent production and a consistent show has paid off. He's the CEO of Webinar Ninja. He draws a lot of stories. A lot of our experiences feed into the show. A lot of listeners of the show who then need a webinar platform, who are thinking about starting webinars, will then, come across over to. So they do feed each other very, very well. I guess ultimately too, we've never left behind our teaching backgrounds. We're both teachers, and even though we left a career as traditional educators behind, so much of what we do with the $100 MBA and with Webinar Ninja comes from a teaching first philosophy, before marketing, before a hyper salesy philosophy. We're teachers above all. And I think that's what attracts people to the show and to the webinar platform as well.
Yeah, it's definitely that thread that kind of links all your different aspects of your journey together. A lot of our listeners on Second Act Success are trying to figure out what their next step is. Do I want to go back to school for a new job? Do I want to just start with a creative passion? Do I want to change roles all completely? So if they're interested in possibly going back to business school and you have this great option, tell us a little bit about what the $100 MBA might be able to do for some listeners who are on the fence about business school.
I think there's a lot of content out there that you can get for free or for a very low cost, like the $100 MBA. The $100 MBA is no longer the flagship. The podcast is really where we deliver all our content. So I would definitely say, and this was my personal experience too with that 2-day filmmaking course, to not dump a whole massive amount of money into something that you're not 100% sure about. It might not apply to every single career. Like if you're going into nursing, I mean, there's definitely careers that you will need to invest in a longer educational path. But if you're looking to learn business skills, there's just so much out there that you can just kind of dip your toes, do a short course, do a couple of weeks, just to really feel like, is this something that I'm interested in? Do I want to learn more? Am I more curious? Does this light me up? Before you're going to dump that $100,000 investment.
So many times you just want it quickly, and spending that money you think is going to bring it to you faster. And I have a story. I feel like I've shared it on the podcast before, but when I left television production, I was trying to figure myself out, find what I wanted to do next. And I was like, well, teaching, maybe I want to teach, just kind of like out of the blue. That's stable. Let me try it. I signed up for a master's program. And I guess I was about a year and a half in. So I was working, but I was taking these classes at night. And I realized I don't want to go in the classroom. And I ended up opening my own business, which was teaching STEM education to kids. So there was some aspect of it. And I always say, I'm grateful for the program. And every month when my card gets swiped, because I'm still paying it off, that it's a blessing because it brought me to where I needed to be as an entrepreneur. But I do look back and I'm like, why was I so quick to jump into it when I could have taken your advice and just done some more research and looked within myself a little bit more before making a big decision?
Yeah, that underlying motivation, like what is it? Sometimes I feel like people just need a different job, a tree change, a sea change. Yeah.
So for listeners of mine that are looking into starting a business or growing their business, how can Webinar Ninja help them?
Running webinars is a great way to build your audience, to start testing ideas as well. Like we have people running Q&A webinars, Ask Me Anything webinars, just a way to engage with potential customers, a potential audience that you want to, deliver value to. You can run, free workshops that people now are so accustomed to signing up to and joining and being able to validate ideas. Like you might have a course idea that you want to do, so you can validate that on a webinar. You can test out product ideas as well. So just a great way to be able to teach, to deliver value, to test ideas. And it doesn't have to be our tool. It can be like a similar tool, of course, but it's just such a great opportunity for people to get there faster. If you think back years ago, 10 years ago, the tools that didn't exist, how much longer it would take for businesses to get off the ground, an idea to get off the ground. I think the opportunities now are just, it's so much faster for somebody to have an idea, test it out, and then decide if they want to pursue it further or just, move on to the next idea.
You really are offering such great tools between both of your businesses for people, just no matter where they are in their entrepreneurial journey or trying to get to that next step. It's definitely your educational background that's leading you in your businesses now. That's wonderful to see.
Oh, thank you.
So you have a podcast with Omar. And what about your other podcasts that you have as well?
So the $100 MBA show is Omar as the host. But the other podcast that I launched with my girlfriend, Kate Erickson, who's the other half at Entrepreneurs on Fire, is called Nicole and Kate Can Relate. We've been part of a mastermind with another friend, Cass. We catch up every month. We share our business struggles, our personal struggles. It's just a really judgment-free, safe space for us three women to support each other and talk through the challenges that we're having. And we just realized that it would be great if we could have these conversations and share them with other women, with other listeners who might be feeling the same, feel less alone, to realize that there sometimes a lot of your problems or a lot of the things that you've got going on are in your head. And as soon as you get them out, you can feel so much better. You can feel so much more confident. You can just feel energized. And so we wanted to take that to other people out there.
I love the idea. And I have to tell you that I love Kate. I'm a huge fan of Entrepreneurs on Fire and John Lee Dumas. They're just wonderful people.
I'm so lucky. Kate's got a heart of gold. She's just an awesome person, an awesome human being. And she just, has a lot of experience in podcasting. And I'm so grateful to have her as a co-host.
All right, it's time for our 5 fast cues of the week. Here we go. Name one thing that these different chapters in your life have taught you.
I feel like adaptability is something that it's a skill that I realize that I have, that I probably undervalued. But as I stepped back and I looked back on, the last 20 years or so, I realized, I've been able to move to different places, different cultures, different cities, different countries, change careers. And I feel like that I look to that skill of being able to adapt to very different or difficult situations, and I look to that in business. I see that as a complementary skill to resilience. I call on that skill when we have setbacks in business because they're inevitable, they're going to happen. So I feel like adaptability is something that I really value now, and feel proud that these chapters have taught me.
Would you recommend taking a leap into a big life change to your best friend?
I would, with a few considerations, I suppose. I think an appetite for risk is important to consider. I don't think everyone has the same appetite for risk. And with big changes comes that acceptance of risk, of failure, of setbacks, of difficulty. So I would definitely assess where my friend is at in terms of their appetite for risk. I love thinking of worst case scenarios because I feel like if you're comfortable with the worst case scenario, then it makes the decision a lot easier. Like if you're okay with the worst case scenario, what's the worst that could happen? Then, and if they are, then I'd say, okay, then go for it. I definitely would also want to know what their motivation is. Like what is motivating that big change? And sometimes you have to dig really, really deep to see like, what is it that I'm actually really looking for in this massive life change? But yeah, I'd want my friends to not have any regrets, though, for sure.
I love that. What is one piece of advice that you would give to someone who is starting their second act today?
I think this is probably going to sound a bit cliche, but relationships are everything. Start surrounding yourself with people that are doing what you are wanting to do, and don't discount any person that comes your way. And this is not about like, what can I gain from everyone? Because I really believe that you're going to get as much as you give. But I think to start focusing on the relationships that you build and the people that come into your life and who's around you. The relationships that I've had now have just paid off and have just been, the most incredible part of this journey, people that I'm surrounded by.
And it's beneficial to them as well. It goes both ways.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah. 100%.
What does the next chapter look like for you?
Well, I alluded to this before. Like, I don't take very lightly or for granted that the businesses are still around, that we're still, in business after so many years. So definitely there's growth for the $100 MBA. I'm really looking to continue to support Omar and the team that we have, which is incredible, behind the $100 MBA Show podcast. We definitely have ambitions to be the #1 business podcast. We're almost there. So I'm definitely supporting that mission. Webinar Ninja, continuing to grow and supporting the community and being that tool for empowering creators and empowering people to, monetize their expertise online, build a business if that's what they want to do, just to be there, to continue to grow that and be that tool for them. I'm still massively passionate about that. And now I'm just enjoying my time with Kate once a week when we get on the mic and we have our conversations and we record those. So yeah, I think I'm just going to keep doing what I've been doing for the time being.
Fantastic. So where can our audience connect with you? All the places. You have so many.
I've got quite a few. If they want to reach out to me personally, my favorite social platform is Instagram. So I'm just Nicole Baldinu. But if they're after free business lessons, they can visit the $100 MBA Show podcast on any podcast app. And if they're curious about running webinars, they can visit webinarninja.com as well.
Nicole, this was so lovely, and I have so enjoyed hearing your story and your journey, and I love that it all connects around education and teaching people and just bringing good into the world, and you're just such an inspiration to me and to our listeners, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you. Me too. Nicole has had quite the journey. Going into education, teaching abroad in different countries, deciding to leave that to explore the world of film, becoming a filmmaker, pivoting once again, and going into business with her now husband. Now they have 2 successful businesses and a podcast. Something that I will take away from this conversation is the idea of adaptability. Nicole thinks adaptability is something that she still uses in business today. The fact that she was able to adapt when she was in Japan and Dubai and other locations abroad. Then she was adaptable when she went and joined film school. And then she was adaptable when she started working in her businesses. I really think that's a great skill and a great personality trait to have. I really like that she brought that up as something that she has kind of carried with her through all these different chapters in her career. Great conversation with Nicole. I hope you found some really valuable gems in this episode, and I'm going to link to all of the places that you can connect with Nicole in the show notes. That is it for today. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to connect some more, I urge you to go to secondactsuccess.co and sign up for my newsletter. You will get an email once a week with career advice, tips, information on different programs that I'll be running, and the podcast and everything else that is in the Second Act Success world. I would love to have you join. I look forward to speaking with you on the next episode of Second Act Success. Make it your best day yet. Have a good one. Thank you for joining us. I hope you found some gems of inspiration and some takeaways to help you on your path to Second Act Success. To view show notes from this episode, visit secondactsuccess.co. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. Reviews only take a few moments, and they really do mean so much. Thank you again for listening. I am Shannon Russell, and this is Second Act Success.